Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is part 3 and the final part of my analysis of Alex Karp's recent interview that he did with Kevin Warsh from Stanford University. Now, this interview was phenomenal. I will leave part 1 and part 2 in the description. You can check it out. I did some analysis on those two parts about Palantir's ability to productize its product. That was in part 2. And part 1 was about if the world goes to crap, how is Palantir going to be able to change the world, and how is the business upside going to be for Palantir, given they're a company that really helps the world when the world goes to crap, i.e. with fractured supply chains and with the COVID vaccine distribution. This part 3 is going to be one of the parts that I've really been looking forward to analyze, and I think it will put a lot of it will shut off a lot of the fears that people have about stock-based compensation. Now, I've done a lot of videos on this. People have done a lot of videos on this. Obviously, Palantir gives a lot of its stock to its best talent and engineers in order to keep them. And it's been a little bit of a concern because a lot of people think this is share dilution. Now, it's not actually share dilution because in their S1, when they went public, they said how many shares they had. They've just been actually allocating those shares now. So they haven't been making new shares. They've just been allocating the 2 billion shares outstanding they had to their actual employees. And that's been used as an expense on the balance sheet, which is why people think you're getting diluted. You're not actually getting diluted. This is what the 2 billion shares were. But this conversation with Karp is going to do a really explicit job explaining why they need to do stock-based compensation, how they need to motivate these employees. And outside of stock-based compensation, because to be honest, that's barely one piece of the pie, which is Karp is very sort of apparent about, there needs to be a cultural significance within the company and the leadership to get these people to truly care about the product that they're building. And that's what we're going to be analyzing in today's video and in Karp's response. So let's get into the video. Let's talk about it. Looking forward to reading your comments, and I'll be analyzing it along the way.
At some level, all you are is trying to recruit the best talent on the planet and then build a culture so they can do the most incredible things. And if I've got that right, or somewhat right, tell me about what that's like today in the world versus 4, 5, 6 years.
By the way, it's recruit, retain, and lead without the people feeling like you're a dictator. So there is a leadership part. It's just very different. So to begin to answer your question, the way people think, so like world-class engineers, there's attracting world-class engineers, retaining them, but retaining them while also inspiring them maybe to think differently about how they would build a product.
So we'll get into this more in a second, but already you should understand that, you know, when you're having concerns about stock-based compensation and, oh, the employees are getting too many shares and that's leading to share dilution, like, you should really understand, like, look at Karp's body language when this happened, right? As soon as he got into his zone about answering this question, he was like, all right. So to attract employees, you've got, right? Like, he gets into this zone because he's like, look, you don't even get what it means to attract employees. It's not just attract the best talent in the world and hopefully you get them to build a product. It's making sure there's a cultural phenomenon within the structure and intrinsic fabric of the company to the point where it feels like, or it doesn't feel like there's a dictatorship in terms of what is required by you, because in companies it kind of is a dictatorship, right? There's no real democracy. You got to get things done. But if you're creative enough as an engineer and you know what to do, you have to be able to match what management wants, what leadership wants, while still being able to create and think outside of the box, right? These are very difficult things to do, especially if you're building some of the complex stuff that Palantir is building. And that's why I think that this is a really interesting discussion, because Karp really gets deep into, like, what does it mean to retain talent? And when you recognize what it means to retain talent, you stop worrying about giving them more shares, because shares is not what actually gets the job done. Building a culture in the company is what gets it done. And that's the more excited part you should be about when it comes to Palantir's culture and how they retain talent, not just the fact that they give them shares, because, like, shares is like, you can't even have a conversation without giving them some compensation in shares because they're just that good of talent.
If you build a product for engineers, you have a very interesting product that no one buys, i.e. where buying is a metaphor for worldly impact. So it is the recruitment and retention is a cultural plus, in our case, track record of doing this, which is, you know, unique in the world, basically, in my view, and in the view of the people that come. I mean, it's a commonly known fact that Palantir gets among, if not the best software engineers in the world, and we've been doing this for a long time, and we're still getting the very best in the world. So, but then there's that, but there's also, you know, if you want.
But what he said right there is that if you get an engineer to build a product that's only available or good for technical engineers, you don't really have a total addressable market, because most of the world is not technical. And one of the big things about Palantir's Foundry software is anyone in the organization, from accounting to marketing to sales to finance to tech, can prop up the software. It's a centralized operating system in which they can understand what's happening in the software. They can make sense of the software, and the software is not so complex to the point where they can't actually make a data-driven decision, which is the whole value proposition of the software, from the software. That's the beauty of Palantir's Foundry, and that's also the beauty of the engineers that are creating that. Because like, you think about the iPhone, right? iPhone's a very complex product. iOS, very complex software, but it feels like a child could use it. That's what true engineering beauty is to me. Like that, like I've never been a computer software engineer, but to me, that's the definition. I think like Steve Jobs has been quoted about this before, but like making something that everyone in the world could use that is super complex under the hood, but doesn't feel complex. That's where you get a really a mass adoptable product. And that's sort of what he's talking about with getting engineers to think outside of the box and think for the average consumer.
Foundry to be built, or PG to be built, or Apollo to be built, or you want to modulate these products so that you can sell them in different ways. You have a high convincing, it's not conviction, but high convincing culture, meaning you're going to have to convince people that are basically not fireable because they know they're the best in the world. And they also know, unlike most people who evaluate software, that the ability to build a product is maximally unfair in the sense that really only a couple of people in the world can build the kind of products we have. And so you have to convince them, cajole them, get inside their thought process to build the product that's not just the one that they might want to build, but one that will actually disrupt the world. And that is a very unique and very hard thing, very time consuming, requires a lot of characteristics, some of which you don't really understand why they work, but de facto we have a culture and people who've done this over and over again. But as an example, the biggest products we've built, I've personally interacted with the person who's built them extremely regularly, because it's like and it's not a hardware problem. See, in hardware, by and large, or in other things, or you say you have a law firm and somebody doesn't want to write the memorandum the way you want it. Well, great, they can go to another law firm. And arguably the lawyer who shows up the next day is even better. That is not the way it works in software. If your person who can build X product leaves, that product will stall or die. But then if you just leave it to them building it, you will get a product that is interesting, that has a total addressable market of 10 people.
Here's the dichotomy there, and that's really where the conversation pretty much ends. Look, it's important to recognize what Karp is talking about here. There are two problems with having the best talent in the world. Number one, they're not fireable. So it's like, you can't be like, I need this to get done in this way, and if you don't get it done, you're fired. Because it's like, you can't fire them. Where are you going to find someone who's better than that? And this, as a Palantir shareholder and investor, you should feel really happy when Karp says this, because he's not joking when he says, look, we have the best talent in the world. He's not saying that for like press. He's saying that because literally he's been in situations, from what he's talking about, where he couldn't fire people because he was like, oh, wait, if I fire them, like, we're not going to find someone to be able to do this. We need the best talent in the world, which means, yes, we need to give up some stock-based compensation in order for that to happen, right? So that's the first problem. The second problem, though, is if you let them do everything they want themselves with no management, no leadership, no dictatorship sort of helping them think outside of the box, or like sort of giving them some guidelines, then they're going to build something that only technical people can use, because this is the problem with technical people. It's like they don't really know how to communicate with the rest of the world. They don't understand sales. They don't understand the average person. So you need Karp's personality, this guy who has a PhD in philosophy that really thinks of the world in a really interesting way, talking to these technical people that are the best in the world. And you have this duopoly of people that cannot leave, that cannot be fired, and people that need to be able to create something for everyone to be able to digest. And that's where Karp and leadership and management and creativity comes in. And that's also where the technical talent that can actually execute the task come in together. This was one of the most insightful parts of the interview, because it showed me how Palantir thinks about their top talent. You know, they think about their top talent in terms of recognizing that these products will fail unless the top talent are able to execute them, because no one else in the world can execute them. So the real culture of the company has to be a culture that's entrepreneurial. It has to be a culture that's creative. It has to be a culture that is a dictatorship, because every business is a dictatorship, but doesn't feel like a dictatorship, because then those people will leave and they're the only ones in the world that understand the code. That's a very thin line to walk, right? And I don't think that's a business problem. I don't think that's like a red flag or anything. I think that's something to be proud of, because you're recognizing that it's one of the best problems to have. It's a very complex and hard problem in a company, but only these people have the ability to create these products. And your company and your mission actually attracted them to come join the company, and you were able to retain them by creating a culture in which they felt they could be creative without feeling like they were stuck in a box. Very difficult thing to do. I mean, I have a company myself. I have a startup. I know what it felt like to recruit co-founders, and I have an awesome CTO right now who does a lot of the tech. But getting co-founders is hard. Getting people to believe in a vision and take a journey with you for the next decade is very difficult, especially when they don't see the immediate payoff in sight. And a lot of these employees, they could have got a lot of great jobs other places. They could have got a lot of the same salaries at other places, but they took the stock-based compensation and the probably $400,000 or $500,000 salary to work somewhere where you don't know if it's actually going to work, but you believe so deeply that if it does work, then it's the only thing that's going to work, that you're going to give your talent to this versus to optimize for ads on Facebook. And that's why I'm very bullish on the company as well, because I just believe they have the best talent in the world. And when you have the best talent in the world, when you have people that are, leaving those big companies to work for you, I mean, there's a big exodus going on in talent right now where a lot of the best engineers are going to work for crypto startups because they're like, hey, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, that was cool in like the 2010s, but now crypto is the wave. So when you have the best minds in the world working on something like crypto, there's a high percentage chance that it succeeds because you just have the best talent in the world figuring out how to make it work. Palantir not only has Foundry for crypto, but their entire business model is oriented around decentralization and building different protocols and civil liberties and protecting stuff that is sort of in the line of what these Web3 engineers are really thinking about, the stuff that they want to be working on, the stuff that they're passionate about, the stuff that motivates them more so than optimizing for ads on Facebook. And I don't hate ads on Facebook. I'm long on Facebook. So yeah, it's a very interesting conversation. It's a very interesting way to think about Karp. And it's also a really interesting way to think about the talent and how Karp actually figures out to get that talent to exist in Palantir. So when someone tells you about stock-based compensation, send them this video because stock-based compensation is literally the stupidest thing you could care about right now. Now, share dilution over the next couple of years, if we see it increasing at an exponential rate like 4, 7, 8%, that's bad. And I don't think that's going to happen because the first year you need to get the talent. And now when you got the talent, you don't really need to do that much dilution anymore, especially if the business is growing at a strong level. And also Palantir is already operationally profitable, right? So like they're not making profits on the books, but they're making an operational profit. So like when someone talks about share-based compensation, they really don't understand the mission of Palantir. They don't understand the depth of complexity of products that is being built at Palantir, and they don't understand basic understandings of human motivation and human nature, which is that no one who's the best in the world is going to work for you unless they feel like they own a piece of the thing they're creating. And that means, yes, you need to give up more than usual of the thing you're creating because you're not as big as Apple and Google right now, and you probably have a mission that's bigger than Apple and Google, and that's what attracted them in the first place. So you're going to have to give up an unordinary amount of shares in order for them to feel like they should continue with the mission and be properly rewarded for contributing heavily, disproportionately to the mission. So those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and let me know your thoughts on what you think about what Karp says about Palantir and its ability to retain and attract the best talent in the world. And do you think that they're going to be able to continue to retain talent over the next 5-6 years as they build out this company and build out their mission? Thank you guys for watching. My name is Mint. I'll see you on the next one.